You said that if Starburst launched today, it might flop. I think that was somewhere like 2021, 22. Do you still believe that? Is the issue the quality of the games or the environment that they're launching into?
I think Starburst wouldn't even make a top 50.
When operators are onboarding huge volumes of content, does that make it harder for genuinely strong titles to perform in your view?
There's many, as Simon mentioned as well, small studios, really good quality, good games, innovative games. But many of them never see daylight.
The current model feels high volume and incremental. So would you say that's financially sustainable long-term for suppliers?
5-10 years ago, it was make a roadmap. It was a question of how quick would ROI happen. Now it's a question of will ROI happen at all?
Hello and welcome to the G3 podcast. Today I'm joined by two of the most respected voices in the iGaming industry, in Hammon and Erland Hellström. Between them, they've helped shape some of the sector's most recognizable titles and commercial success stories. But they've also seen, as we'll be discussing today, online slots evolve from what was a genuine creative frontier into today's hyper-saturated market. So now, as the driving forces behind Big Daddy Gaming, they're stepping back into the arena at a moment when many, or at least some, believe the economics of the industry are starting to strain. Simon, Erland, great to have you both on. I just wanted to kick us off with kind of a big picture question, and then we'll kind of delve into some more deep topics. So, as I say, you've seen this industry from almost every angle, creatively, commercially, and now, as we were touching on before, Erland joined us, Simon, building something new. So if you compare the slots industry today to 10 or 15 years ago, would you say it's actually healthier? Simon, I'll start with you.
I think like most questions, right, there's a flip answer to all these things. But I would say it's healthier in some respects, right? The barrier to entry has decreased, so you're seeing a lot more young studios, small studios coming to the forefront. Technically, it's easier to get your content distributed than ever before, so that's a positive. You're not just reliant on the previous incumbents. So I think that dynamic has been quite a positive one for the industry, and it's brought fresh new brands, fresh new ideas to the marketplace. Is it healthier? That's a very big moot point. You see far more volume. Is it all good? You see far more competition, less airtime, less visibility, less product discovery, potentially less value of the product. So I think there's a counter argument to barrier to entry coming down being a positive thing. But yeah, I would say no, in short, though. I don't think it's a healthier space, especially if you're a creative mindset or a creative young studio.
Erland, you experienced kind of serious, or certainly serious scale during Evolution's hypergrowth, if you can call it that. When an industry kind of professionalizes and scales like this one has, do you think that creativity inevitably gets squeezed?
Both yes and no in that sense, right? But I think if Simon mentioned it from a product perspective, I want to mention it from a financial perspective. And I think that the difference between the operators and the suppliers when it comes to revenue results has been very variant, right, during the years. So that's quite clear when you see certain suppliers and their EBITDA margin and so on and so forth. I think that's exactly where the industry needs to come together a little bit. Operators has been, especially hard regulated markets, the operators are struggling. They need to do something new, and I think that's also where they look at the partnership between the suppliers and the operators, and that is exactly what I think we are going, how we are entering the market now with that focus, partnering up instead of just finding quick fixes, but then relates back to product.
And you touched there, Erland, on that commercial perspective. When operators are onboarding huge volumes of content, does that make it harder for genuinely strong titles to perform in your view?
For me, I see there's many, as Simon mentioned as well, small studios, really good quality, good games, innovative games. But many of them never see daylight. And it's because it needs to go for the operator, right? The games are created for the players, but the operators are catering for the games, for the players, which means that there needs to be a win-win. The value needs to be there for the operators. So it's sometimes I think it's very hard for a small, very good, creative, quality-wise suppliers. The mass production of slots, of course, that we have seen that in the past, and I think that can also continue. Is it the best? No, I don't believe so, of course, because at the end of the day, operators have their flagship games that continue growing month on month, year on year, and all the other games, get that certain limited amount of lifetime, and then produce more and more and more, which also then becomes very expensive.
Simon, a few years ago, in a similar vein to what I just asked Erland, you said that if Starburst launched today, it might flop. I think that was somewhere like 2021, 22. Do you still believe that? Is the issue the quality of the games or the environment that they're launching into?
I did say that, and I firmly stand by that, because the market dynamics were very, very different. We're talking, that game was launched, people will say, why was this so successful? Timing, in reality. Was it a fantastic looking game, mechanically? No. It was good timing of a good product, catering to the marketing upswing, and was very well suited. So if it was launched today, I think it'd be relative noise in reality. So any supplier needs to pay attention and firm attention to the market shifts, market dynamics, operator needs, player needs. And this is where, as a young studio, new studio, you can't just do what everyone else has done before. You have to be different, you have to stand out, and you have to find where is the market trend or shift going to, both from a player perspective, but also from a general economic perspective. And unless you're targeting your product offering, your business offering to suit the market conditions now and where it's heading, you won't be successful. So, but in super short, I think Starburst wouldn't even make a top 50 today, probably of that week.
So you'd say almost that today's model doesn't give great times enough time to become great, if you get me. Is that fair?
I'm a firm believer that quality will always outperform quantity, right? So, a high quality product is a hygiene factor, and cream always rises to the top. I'm never saying that there's never room for a blockbuster hit to come out. I just think the market conditions of which are much tougher today, because you just don't have the visibility. You don't have the share of visibility on the websites for long enough, and so on and so forth. So to be a blockbuster hit, it's got to be on a level or a resonation that didn't need to be 4 or 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago, right? So, quality will always outshine quantity, but it's tough. It's definitely tough to make a blockbuster hit.
So with that market context in mind, let's talk a bit about sustainability. Erland, the current model feels high volume and incremental. So would you say that's financially sustainable long-term for suppliers?
It all depends on their business model, of course, and some bit of luck as well, right? Like Simon mentioned, you need to have some of the content that actually sticks. Is it easy? No. Don't forget as well, if you look at everyone's playing mobile today, 9 to 12 thumbnails available on the first page, right? And then, of course, what else can they play? Is what recently play and so on. So I think eventually, I think it will be unsustainable. And also from an operator perspective, it will be unsustainable to keep up launching this many games, especially because they also need to be more efficient. And especially, I would say, the European market, highly regulated. All of these operators are looking over their own headcounts as well, and how much they can actually produce or deliver each week. So eventually, I don't think so. And also, don't forget that the majority of the revenue of slots especially comes from a certain amount of games, a certain amount of suppliers today. So the tier 2, tier 3s, they are actually struggling, and they are the one who always constantly needs to produce more. And then to fight against each other and then also get that exposure, it is not easy. So long answer, but in short, I don't think so, no.
Would you agree there, Simon, in terms of that kind of tier 2, tier 3 supplier being the ones that would be the most under strain in the current environment?
Absolutely. The irony is that the incumbents of 5 years ago have shifted, but you still have a new set of incumbents, right? They're not the same names, but the dominance or share of wallet they share or enjoy on an operator is still there. and that impacts the smaller supplier. I think their strategies vary. They can go very niche down. Some are trying to shock and awe and create like sort of titles that are for headlines or for news, or with title A, B, or C, which you can argue is a good strategy or a good for the market. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's tough for them because their answer to that is often throw mud at the wall and see what sticks. And the roadmap dynamics have changed. 5-10 years ago, it was make a roadmap. It was a question of how quick would ROI happen. Now it's a question of will ROI happen at all? Actually, in fact, I'm building a roadmap of 20, 30 games in a year, and maybe one or two of them hopefully pays for the rest. Well, that's not sustainable, because what happens, like many, if you don't get that hit, if you don't get that resonation, if you don't get that player buy-in, if you don't get that operator buy-in, you're burning cash pretty quick. So it's there's a challenge there presenting itself, because no one's daring to really step outside the mold, because also they're not being afforded some of the airtime and visibility to do so.
From a media perspective, we see a lot of suppliers come into the market who will interview and chat to at these expos, and it's always, we're going to do things completely different. We're not going to do the Egyptian theme games. We're not going to use the mechanics everybody else is using. And then a few months down the line, it becomes, well, actually, we're going to have to. We're going to have to start creating sequels. We're going to have to start doing the Cleopatra games, etc. There's clearly a lot of mechanic recycling in the market. So is innovation truly rewarded today, or is safety simply the smarter commercial play?
So I think it's a funny, not funny for them, but it's a funny statement that you come out with, right? Like, as in, yeah, we're going to be totally different. We're going to do things super innovative, and then 3 months later, here's my book of deluxe, right? It's the sad narrative where they feel, oh, that's a safer win. We need the economics, but typically now that they're not safe. Players aren't stupid. Operators are bored of seeing the same stuff. Who wants to be fed the same game rehashed with a different name, but the same theme, same mechanic of very little innovation? Does it mean that you need hyper innovation to stand out? I don't think so. What you need is you can have familiar mechanics, you can have fun mechanics. There's nothing wrong with the mechanic per se, but if you're lazy as a supplier not to tweak it, change it, enhance it, add an experience around it, put real thematic differentiation on it, it's a lazy approach if you don't do that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with taking the thousands of mechanics that are out there and playing with them, making it feel familiar, but the lazy approach of just bashing out another book over with Egyptian theme, and no one cares anymore about that stuff. They want to see something a bit fresh, a bit different, that feels like the suppliers put effort into it. And if you're trying to churn out 20, 30, 40 games a year, you're not doing that. You're just conveyor belt. And that for me is the inherent problem of a volume supplier.
And Erland, on that point, if a smaller studio launches something genuinely different, how realistic do you think it is that gains kind of meaningful traction? Do you think that the industry is almost unintentionally penalized originality in a sense?
No, I wouldn't say it in that way. What's important is about the distribution, right? Making sure that, we're talking about innovation when it comes to actual slots. I think it's also important to change as a company on how they approach, both from a commercial perspective, but then the product perspective, because I truly believe in going back to Big Daddy, and our focus here is about, okay, first of all, which will be our core markets. We were quite early on and say, okay, core regulated markets in Europe, which follows the traditional tier ones. That is a core market. And also due to our setup, we have no technical legacy. Our focus is not here to go in and just sweep the market with games. It's about being very careful about the approach from a financial perspective, but we need to really engage together with operators. If they find the commercial model very attractive, and also you see the potential in a commercial model, then our games will get the exposure it's needed for the market and the players. And I think that has been the strategy. We're seeing now quite well that is also the response we're getting. And I think that is the fine line about, product and commercial need to stick together. It goes in one, you can't have very cheap commercials and then very, poor quality of product. And the same thing as well. If you have a great quality product, you can't overprice it because everything needs to go for the operator, and operators are the one who decides which content will be delivered. So for us, the focus is always number one, to be honest. Of course, we're making games for the players, and that's the fun for the game. But the value should be directly presented to the operators. That's what we're trying to do.
I have found it interesting that Big Daddy has prioritized regulated Europe from day one with its Swedish license and the MGA approval. That feels deliberate, and you've just said it's deliberate. So would you say that regulation, I don't know, is it a good discipline or is it a creative constraint?
I can talk about that from a product perspective. Of course, regulation puts restrictions on your product because again, I come down to effort and into your product development. If you just take a general, let's say quasi.com product and then you try and tailor it and customize it for regulation, which is what I would hazard a guess 99.9% of suppliers do, you're going to end up with a trade-off of product, right? So it's never going to be great for that market that you're targeting. But if you truly create a product that is customizable and fun and fair in terms of its value delivering for a certain market, then you tailor it and actually put the effort in to make sure a player in market A, B, C, D, and E can resonate it irrespective of the restrictions attached. Then you've got a winning formula. It comes down to effort. People see and suppliers see often markets of we need to customize and we need to do it on a 50, 60, 70 game batch to remove this or tweak that. That's not good for the product experience. If you build with the actual regulation in mind, then you will get a much better overall product. And this is something that we put a lot of attention into. We not only about the markets we are licensed or going after now, but also for the future, that we are building the products with those regulations in mind, and we're not just cut off A, cut off B, and turn off Y, right? It's about tailoring their experience. So no matter who you are, you get the Big Daddy difference, no matter what market you're playing from.
In terms of that Big Daddy difference, Erland, what would you say is the company's commercial approach to the supplier-operator relationship? Is it different to how other suppliers approach that relationship?
I would say it's very different without going into detail. But the most important part is the value, right? That the operator should feel that the more they invest in Big Daddy, the incentive financially is much higher for them as well. So they don't see us as a short-term solution, but the more we actually reproduce great games that they deliver, the more the value it is for the operator as well. And that is how it should feel, because I know it sounds a little bit like a cliche, but the win-win, that's been long gone in the industry for a long time. But it's all about that for us, finding that to have a good partnership, not only for the short term, but for the long term as well. And we as well, being a smaller studio at this stage, for us, that's so important to get the feedback from the operators and also the opt-in, and they see the value constantly the more games we deliver as well.
That's very interesting that you suggest that Big Daddy's approach is kind of win-win alignment. And that almost suggests that there's something broken in the supplier-operator relationship today. Would you say that that's a fair thing to suggest?
I think everyone is in a different stage, right? You have the huge suppliers today. Of course, they have their business model and they have some really good, strong games. It also means that they have a lot of headcounts, focusing on this one. I think they're smaller studios, like I said as well. They really put time and maybe too much time into certain games, because they need to get the value back. I think before we started, we had a clear strategy, which means that we always need to think about our own cost, but also our way to market, which means that we actually have an opportunity now to enter the market, try to do it different. And I think meeting up with both Simon and Daniel initially, it's all about, not only game-wise, it's about our whole approach as a slots provider and how we conduct things. And I think that is something we talk about every day, trying something different, because I think with everyone's experience, that exactly also that thrills us, because we know that, or we believe as well that the industry needs it. And we think I'm not saying we have the 100%, checking the box and everything, but it's fun while trying it as well.
Simon, would you It's interesting because this whole conversation, it's been kind of more product with you and more commercial of Erland, which was the purpose, of course. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on whether you think the future is less about inventing the next feature and more about redesigning the contract, if you will?
I think it's about taking a step back and looking at market dynamics, ultimately. If you look at where the operator is today, they have so much content being thrown at them. Content is almost a commodity. They're under immense market pressures when it comes to regulatory taxes. And then on the flip side, they are seeing some partners or so-called partners, posting obscene sort of EBITDA margins, right? So the dynamics feels off in some respect. And conversely, there are suppliers that are really putting a lot of love, effort, production value, not getting the return of investment because they don't have the size and scale. So there is I would say, an issue with market dynamics. I don't think it's necessarily a product focus or a commercial focus that ultimately will define that shift. Our view here is that it needs both. It needs a product strategy that complements a very strong and defined commercial strategy. And that ultimately has to devalue the value to the player and the value to the operator. And that will be the upset to that balance. And this is what Big Daddy's trying to do. We're trying to reset some of the dynamics in the marketplace that I feel are long overdue. And we aim to bring something fresh there. And a fresh perspective, ultimately.
Would you say that resetting of the dynamics is something that you're trying to impose upon the industry? Or do you think it's something that the industry would almost auto-correct itself over time and you're just ahead of the curve?
I don't think it's anything we impose. I think it's something that is being long...
It's the wrong word.
No, granted. But it's something that's being wanted by operators. In fact, the overwhelming feedback we've had is... thank you for coming with this idea. Obviously, change is always a bit scary here or there, but ultimately it's a want, not a need. Will market dynamics shift? To be honest, I think it's been spoken about for the last 4 or 5 years and very little has changed. So I think you do need a disruptor in the dynamic to make things happen. Again, this is why we're here, right? To bring great quality product with a fresh perspective and delivering real value and win-wins across the board. And I feel we have the experience to do that. But will the market just automatically do that? Eventually, it will get to a point where there isn't enough sustainable economics on both fronts, right? So change is inevitable. Are we ahead of the curve? I like to think so, but we also need the market to embrace that and change with us.
And Erland, to round us out, Big Daddy, what's upcoming this year? And just in a more general sense, what do you think the industry will look back on in kind of 2025 or even the period between, say, the pandemic and 2026? What will the industry look back on and almost admit it got wrong in that period?
I think during the pandemic, that's something globally that no one know how things will work out, right? And from the gaming industry perspective, it was booming. And I think not working with Big Daddy back then, but you took a little bit for granted. Of course, being the industry we are, there needs regulation restrictions as well, so keeping the players safe, which of course then also means more investments for operators. Also more when it comes to responsible gaming, taxes are raising, so things are changing, right? So I think maybe there was a little bit too much optimism, of course. After that as well, the more stricter regulation came in, which I think is correct. And now, as always then, what's the next step, right? And I think people are looking at different scenarios on how to solve all of these things. And I think eventually operators and supplier will start finding the right path forward, right? And I think coming back to that as well, that's also a little part of it because we see that this time is now as well from a supplier perspective to try something new and also getting that good feedback while doing it. And I think that is exactly what will happen continuously. Not everyone will be able to do a quick, turnaround or change around because that's just how it works as a company. The ones who has the opportunity, they will try to. But it's also very important not just to do it from a financial perspective, you need to have the strategy and a focus about what will the end result be. And I think that's going to be a couple of shifts within the industry later on.
It's been a really enjoyable discussion. So thank you to you both. It feels like we're at almost a genuine inflection point within the industry. For years, the conversation has always been about more. It's been about more games, more features, more markets. But what I'm hearing from the both of you is that the next phase isn't about more. It's about alignment. It's about sustainability, and it's about discipline. So to the both of you, thank you for your candor, and it'll be fascinating to see how this next chapter plays out with Big Daddy Gaming. So I appreciate you both coming on.
Thank you so much.